Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's DAF Hayaymi Maseches Bava Kamma DAF Lamed. We are holding at the Mishnah, which is 2 lines off the top of the Amud. Hashoy fechmayim birshus arab. A person spills his water out in the street and creates a hazard. Vuhuzak bohen acher. A fellow comes along, slips, and gets hurt. Chay beniska, the fellow who spilled the water, is responsible for all resulting damages. Another example. Hamatznia esakoitz. A person takes something hazardous, like a thorn, versus a chuchas, or broken glass, and he hides it in the street in an irresponsible way. There is gidra b'koitz. Another example. A person borders up his property using a thorn fence, which is obviously prickly and can cause damage to the pedestrians on the street. Another example, or he has a stone, fence, a stone wall, which collapsed into the street, and he left it there. So in any one of these cases, if somebody comes and is huzak, is harmed, is hurt, Chay ben Iskan, this fellow is fully responsible. So going back to that first case of the water spilled into the street, which caused damage. Amar Rav, lo yishanu. When do we say that one needs to pay for that damage? Ela denitnefu kela b'mayim. That's only if the fellow's clothing was damaged directly by that water. So the water caused the water damage. And Rav holds that this water, which still belongs to the person who spilled it, is called like a shoyer. It's like his property that causes damage, not like a bur, because he still owns it. In which case, if it's like a shoyer, you have to pay even for damage occurring to a kli, as opposed to if it would be a bur putter on kalim. So that's Rav's opinion, which we discussed, by the way, a couple of days ago as well. So that's the only case that he'll be chayiv if the kalim were harmed. Aval hu atzmei potter. But if the pedestrian himself slipped on that water and fell into the street, he banged himself into the actual pavement, which is part of the street. It's karka ilam. It's not privately owned. It doesn't belong to this fellow with the water. Aval hu atzmei. Then he's potter. Karka ilam is ikasa. He was harmed by karka ilam, public property. What do you mean? This fellow now made a mud pile, and this fellow banged himself in this mud pile, which was crafted by this fellow who poured the water. It's like his doing. It's like his making. It's not karka elam. It identifies with this person. Picture it like his mud. Right? It's his thing. And we know that if a person takes refish, waste, mud, and throws it into the street, he's fully responsible. We're going to see next Mishnah. So let this mud that this fellow created by pouring the water be like his refish, like his zeva, like waste. It's his doing. It's his thing. Why is he potter? Well, misavers loitama maya. So the response is, what do you think? The water was not yet absorbed, meaning there's actual mud intact, which can be attributed to this person. No, but the Tamamai was speaking of the water had been absorbed within the ground, so it's still slippery, which caused this pedestrian to slip. But ultimately, he struck the karka ilam. There's no actual mud intact to hold him responsible for. So bottom line is, we have 2 similar cases, one in our Mishnah and one back on Daf Chavches, regarding water being mazik somebody. In both cases, Rav says it's your thing. Direct damage to kalim, you chayiv. V'tati lamli, why discuss both cases which are really the same? Why the repetition? The answer is, depends on the season. There's an additional chiddush in our Mishnah, which was not in the previous Mishnah. One Mishnah speaks about spilling water out in the street during summertime, where you're dirtying the street. You have no permission to do that. You're fully responsible. Whereas our Mishnah adds another dimension. Even during winter time, when it's all muddy and yucky, so even though you have rishus to spill your water out there, but ultimately you have to look after it. If somebody is harmed, you're responsible. The Sanya, as we learned in the Mishnah, back on DAF, Avav, Kol Elu, it's a brisa. Kol Elu she'amru paiskin, all those situations, the following individuals, where the Chachamim allowed them to divert their wastewater into the street. Paiskin, we saying they can channel their pipelines. V'goyfim are saying they can clean out their waste pits into the streets. B'mois hachama, einan rishus. They have no permission to do that during summertime when the streets are relatively clean. U'b'mois hakshamim yesh lam rishus. During winter time, when in any case things are muddied and dirty, they can direct their wastewater into the street. But there is a disclaimer: you can do it, but you're responsible. You have to look after it. You have to watch it. Even though you have permission, it causes damage. Chayav and l'sham, they have to pay. So the point in our Mishnah is, even though it's like shamim, you have full right to do this, but if there was hezek, you have to pay. The Mishnah continues with a fellow who hid some hazardous material in the street. And the Mishnah continues. A fellow who was goider as gidrei b'koitzim, he made this thorny fence which causes damage. The Mishnah says you have to pay for damages. It's only concern if he had his thorns leading into the street. So then he's responsible. But if he was very exact in the way he placed his fence on the property line, not leading into the street, so even if somebody bumped into it, he's potter. Why? My time in potter. Why is he exempt? Really, we had this yesterday. He's letting people sort of go into his property. He's opening it to the public. So why is he not chayiv for placing an obstacle, a hazard right there? Omar Rav Acha Breid Rav Ika. The reason is lefishain darkon shobnei adam lischachach b'ksolim. A person walks on the street, he typically does not rub his shoulders against the walls and against the fences. So it's an unlikely scenario that somebody would actually make contact with his thorn, for which he's not responsible. Tanu Rabbanan. We have another case, this time pertaining to private property. Hamatzniya koisosav uschuchi yosav l'sech koisel shechaveru. Imagine a person takes his, hazardous material, his koitzim, his chuchis, and he buries it into his friend's wall without permission. One fine morning, his neighbor goes ahead and demolishes his wall. And everything in there falls into the street, and it causes damage. Who's responsible? The fellow who placed these materials into the wall, or the fellow who collapsed the wall? Chayiv hamatzniya. The person who put it there is chayiv. Because what right do you have to place your things in your next door neighbor's wall? That's only true if it was a shaky wall to begin with. So you should have anticipated that ultimately he's going to crash down that wall. You should not have placed your stuff there. But if it's a healthy, strong wall, you didn't have to anticipate that this fellow will renovate his wall. And therefore you're potter. Hamatzniya potter. V'chayev bala koisel. Who's responsible? The person who broke down the owner of the wall is responsible. Because you saw there was stuff there, you should have put it away. And kept it from the public, from the Rishus Haram. Amar Avina. So let's go back to the first part. If it was a koisel ro'ua, you should have expected this thing to be renovated one day. You shouldn't have placed your stuff there. Based on this, says Ravina, I have another interesting halach. Zoyse Meres. We can conclude based on this. Person has a pit, an open pit. He finds a pail belonging to his friend, and he puts it on the pit to cover it. Next morning, the pail owner comes along and pulls his pail off the pit. Who asked you to put my pail on your pit, right? So if something happens because of this open hazard, the balabar is chayiv, right? Because What right did you have to use the other fellow's going to come take his pail? Just like in the case of the Kaisel Ru'ua. You knew that the Kaisel was going to be broken down one day. Why did you leave your glass here? Well, Pshita, obviously, it's a very obvious halacha. It's the same exact case. What's the point of Ravina? Mal the Tema, perhaps I would say there is room for distinction. Perhaps. You can't compare the two things. You know why? The Baal of the Kaisel, the wall owner who collapsed this wall, is absolved from any responsibility. The Baal of the hazardous chayiv in that case. He didn't know it. How do I know who put this glass into my wall? So what do you want me to do? So when I find glass, I'm not responsible to go. I don't have to go find the owner. But here, the pail, owner knew. We presume that he knows who dug this pit. He should have informed him before pulling off his pail. Kamash one the chalish is no. I'm not responsible. I don't have to go bother finding the owner. Who asked you to put my pail on your pit? Ton Rabban. Chasidim are Rishonim, the real virtuous people of the earlier generations who were very careful with interpersonal relations and monetary halachas. They would hide all their hazardous materials, their thorns, their broken glass, in their own property. 3 tefach into the ground. Lest even the plow come and bump into it and unearth it and expose it. So deep into the ground, beyond the reach of the plow of the machresha. That's the way to do it. Rav Sheshes shadlu benura. Rav Sheshes would put his things, would burn them in the fire. Rav shadlu b'diglas, he would dump it into the Chidekel river, out of reach and safe. Amar Yehuda, Haimad de boy lemevi chasida. A person really wants to achieve the level of being a chassid. Aside from davening and learning erlich, be extra careful with the issues of ben adam l'chaveroi, monetary issues. L'kayim milah de nezikin. You should be extra careful to keep the chumrais regarding nezikim, as we just learned. Rabba milah de avos. If you want to be a chassid, be careful with the midos, the things that we find in Maseches Avos. Ve'amrila, some say a true chassid is somebody who's mekayim milah de brachos, halachos of brachos, which are very complex and sometimes a bit difficult to keep when a person is faced with confusing situations regarding food, etc. But actually, the Rashba learns that when we speak about milah de brachos, we're speaking about things which are attributed to Chasidim. For instance, in Maseches Brachos, we learn about the Chasidim or Rishonim that would really invest a lot of effort in preparation for tefillah. They would wait a whole hour before they daven. That's called milah de brachos. And likewise, when we speak about milah de avos, we're speaking about the things that are attributed to a Chasid in Maseches Avos, like Shali shalcha, shalcha shalcha, mine is yours is yours. That's a Chasid. Okay, so bottom line is, even when one has permission to spill his stuff in the street, he's responsible to take care that the public is protected. And we learned about a fellow who puts his stuff into the other fellow's wall, when he's responsible and when he's not. Continues the Mishnah. Hamoitzi estivnoi v'kashoi lirshus harabim lizval. So the way it was is that they used to take their teven, that's the straw, and kash. Teven is what stays behind after threshing. The kash is the part that stayed in the ground when they cut off the grain. So in any case, these pieces of hay, of straw, they used to take them out in the street, and people would step all over them, and it would sort of rot, and then it would be used for fertilizer. That was a process. So a person takes these items into the street, to make them into zevel, into fertilizer. Somebody comes and slips on them. You're fully responsible. And actually, there's a knas. You have no business putting it in the street. Somebody comes and takes it, take it away. The quicker the better. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol HaMekalklin B'Shus Rabim. Not only this, any type of situation where a person creates a hazard, an obstacle in the street, V'yiziku Chayav L'Shalom. It causes damage, you have to pay. And likewise, V'chala Koydem B'hen Zocha, anybody can come take it. One more example is Ha'ifach is HaGol B'Shus Rabim. There is gull, animal waste sitting in the street. A person comes and sort of flips it over. Somebody comes and gets damaged. He has to pay for it because he created the obstacle by flipping it and changing its location. Or because he was zoich in it, he acquired it, it's his, he's responsible. Now the Mishnah, which indicates that a person is responsible for even Teven Makash sitting in the street, apparently we're not going like Rabbi Yehuda, who says as follows: it depends what time of the year, it depends what season. Apparently they had specific times they would do this. So when it's time to put out the zevel, you have permission to do that. You can leave it out in the street for 30 days, pile it up for 30 days. So people, animals travel on it and, process it. That's allowed. Shabanas Kain Hinchel Yeshua Es Haaretz. This was one of the conditions that Yeshua set forth when he allotted, when he distributed Eretz Yisrael to the nation. This is one of the takanis. Everybody has a right to do this. So if that's the case, why am I responsible for damages? I feel it in Rabbi Yehuda. You know what? Even Rabbi Yehuda would agree. Sure, I can do it, but I have to look after it. I have to protect the crowds. If there's damage, I have to pay for it. What do you mean? We have a Mishnah, you don't have to. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if I placed my Ner Chanukah out in the street and it created havoc, caused a fire, I'm part of Neshub Rishus because I'm allowed to do it. Apparently, Rishus is a mitigating factor. My love, Mishum Rishus Bezdin, because Bezdin authorized me to do it. So likewise, in the case of the waste, I'm allowed to do it. So why am I obligated? Why am I responsible? Loi Mishum Rishus Mitzvah. Keep in mind, there are two levels of Rishus. Sure, a person is allowed to put his waste out there, but he got to look after it. Here we're speaking about Chanukah, which is the Rishus of a mitzvah, Pirsum Enisa. So that's a higher level. Over there, Rabbi Yehuda says, I'm Pata. The Sanya, Rabbi Yehuda, he explains it. But in Chanukah, I'm Pata, why? Rishus mitzvah. Thu May comes another raya, which would lead us to conclude that the Mishnah, which holds me responsible despite the fact that I'm allowed to do it, is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Because he holds even if it's Rishus Bez, not only Rishus Mitzvah, even Rishus Bez not Pata. Tashma, Kol Elu She'amru Mutar L'Kalkul, Rishus Rabim. All these fellows who can put the stuff out in the street, if there's damage, you have to pay. Rabbi Yehuda Paiter. He says, no, you're Pater, because if you have permission, you're Pater. So bottom line is, how does Rabbi Yehuda fit with our Mishnah, which says you're Chayiv? Omar of Nachman, I'll tell you how. Masnis and Shaloi B'Shas Yitzol HaSvalim. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees to our Mishnah, because we're speaking about out of season. There were specific times that you can put your stuff out in the street. The Mishnah is speaking about when it's not such a time. All agree in this case, I'm Chayiv. Rav Ashi Omar, I'll give you another answer. Why our Mishnah is different? Why in our Mishnah I'm Chayiv, even according to Rabbi Yehuda? Tivna v'kash tanan. We're speaking about straw, hay, which are slippery, b'shem the misharki. Very slippery. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees, you don't do that. Waste, animal waste, that's something else, but hay and straw, that's slippery stuff, you don't put it in the street. So bottom line, Mishnah says, person places his zevel and his teven v'kash in the street, and somebody is harmed, you have to pay for it. What about Rabbi Yehuda? Well, Rabbi Yehuda says by a mitzvah, you're certainly pater. What about if it's not a mitzvah? You just have rishus. We have a brayso that even in that case I'm pater. So how does it reconcile with our Mishnah? Two pshatim. Either our Mishnah is out of season or it's slippery stuff. Okay, now Mishnah says if I export my teven to the street, I'm creating a hazard. Anybody comes along and takes it, gesundheit. Can he take everything? Or just, an amount equivalent to what I benefited from putting it in the street. Let's say my raw material is worth 100. Leaving it on the street, picks it up to 200. How much did the Chachamim fine me? I lose everything? Or just that extra 100? Amar Rav ben begufan, ben mishvach, and everything. Whether the extra, the shvach that it benefited in the street, the extra value I lose, Somebody has a right to take it. And even the guf, the actual material, the principle, I lose that as well. Anybody can come take everything. Huzir Amar, no, he says we have to differentiate. B'shvacham, whatever I benefited from this experience, that anybody has a right to take from me. Avaloi b'gufan, nobody can take the actual thing. What's the point of this machlokes? Rav Savar konsu gufan mishum shvacham. We apply a knas to the entire thing, so that the knas on the shvach will be successful. Otherwise, it's hard to differentiate, and people will hesitate to take. Therefore, we just put it into one package deal, take everything, and clear the street. Uziri amar lo konsu gufan mishum shvach. No, we don't apply this broad gzeira. Shvach, yeah, you can take, but not the guf. Tanan. And the Mishnah concluded with a third case. Person flips over the waist. Somebody comes along and slips on it. I have to pay for damages. Now the Mishnah leaves out something which I mentioned in the beginning of the Mishnah. It doesn't say anybody can come take my waist. It's missing that line. So what does that show? What does that prove to us? As Rashi explains. Apparently, for some reason, the golol, this waist, doesn't really improve by sitting in the street. Okay, so that's clear. Golol does not improve. Whatever it is, right? So that explains why there's no kol hakodim zacha by golol. There's no shvach to speak of. There's no additional benefit that I experienced by having it in the street. So that's a kasha on Rav. That's a right to Zeiri that the knas only applies to shvach, and only when there is shvach, as opposed to this case, where there's no shvach. No, says the matana l'reisha. We already mentioned kol hakodim zacha in the first part of the Mishnah with the tevin v'kash that has shvach. But in the seifa, the same thing applies to the seifa, even though there's no shvach. There's no need to repeat the same thing over and over again. The Mishnah just means to, apply it to all cases equally. Really? For Tanya Lo, we have a brayso which explains the Mishnah, which indicates otherwise. It says asur mishum gezel. The Bryce explains that you're not allowed to take. It's forbidden. You don't steal this stuff. So we're assuming that it's going specifically on the golol. There's no knas on the golol. No, kik tani asur mishum gezel akula masnis. No. Let's relearn this Bryce. It means to say like this: in all cases, whether it's tevin, kash, whatever, even if it has shva. Anybody can come grab it, right? And the Bryce is telling you, look, Reuven finds the stuff in the street, Gzunte, clear out the street, take it home. And if Shimon steals it from Reuven, he's a ganav, because it's rightfully Reuven's. He had a right to take it. The Chacham allowed him to take it. Kiktoni asur mishum gezel akula masnisin. He's going on everything in the Mishnah. Lo iseh shekadam v'zacha. Reuven, who actually acquired it from the street by authority of the Chachamim. If somebody comes and takes it from him, don't think you just grab. You're taking something which now belongs to Reuven. So, whether it's Tevin, Kash, Golol, there's a Knas. Anybody has a right to take it, and be careful, don't take it from him, because it's really his. But if we take a close look at the Brisa, that's not what the Brisa means when it says Asura Mishim Gezel. Nobody can take it from him. It means he can't take it to begin with. Tivnei v'kash v'shisarab. Lizbal, if a person exports his material to the street, somebody comes and is hurt, you have to pay. And therefore anybody can come and grab it and take it home. And there's no issue of gezel. There's no issue of gezel. So apparently this line, this statement, Mutar Mishum Gezel, not going on taking it from Reuven. We just said it belongs to Reuven. He has a schos. It means to say that Reuven should not have any qualms about taking it. There's no issue of Gezel. Chachamim gave you the green light to take it. So clearly we're speaking about Reuven's issue, not the one who's taking it from Reuven. And on that the Brisa continues. But in a case where a person flips this golol in the street, which has no potential for benefit, for shvach, for improvement, and a person comes and stumbles on it, you have to pay for damages. So again, asal mishum gezel here means, likewise, this fellow now, who wants to grab it from the street, you're not allowed to grab it from the street. There's no knas, there's no fine, there's no green light to take it off the street. Why? Why is Golol different than Tevin or Kash? Oh, apparently the answer is because we're going like Ze'iri. The Knas is only when there is potential for improvement. We're penalizing your, the Shvach, what you gain from putting it in the street. But Golol has no gain. There's no heta to take it. That's a Kasha on Rav, who says that the Knas is all-encompassing. It's not just specific to Shvach, it's even on the Guf. So then why is there no Knas on the Golol? Omar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Hold on, 1 second. Golol Karamas? You're asking from Golol? Davar she'esh by Shvach, Konser Gufa Mishim Shvach. True. Although according to Rav, the Knas, the penalty applies to the Guf as well, but only something which has potential to improve, has potential to make Shvach. There we say, Konser Gufa Mishim Shvach. We don't want to limit the Knas to the Shvach, we extend it to the Guf. One thing might lead to the next, right, fine. But Davar she'ein by Shvach, Golol, which has no potential for further improvement, so it's not in the picture at all, it's not discussing it. It's not part of the halacha, loy kansu. There's no knas at all. Right? Think about it. Rav's agreeing in principle that the knas is specific to shvach. We don't want you to gain, to have benefit from doing this thing in the street. Right? But because that knas of the shvach, we apply it to the guf as well, we don't differentiate, to make it clear and simple. But of course, something which from which you cannot benefit. So there's no motivation to put it in the street. There's no reason for a knas. But a thing that does have potential for shvach, there Rav says, look, knas is all encompassing. Zira says it's specific to the part that you benefited off the street. Now comes a new question. According to Rav, right, that we have a knas on the guf on account of the shvach. Do we have to wait for shvach to develop? Alter kansinan? Do we make the knas right away before shvach even develops? Or do we wait until there's some sort of, income, some sort of improvement, and then we say, okay, that triggers the knas, which now covers everything? Which way is it? Tashma, here comes a raya. Because a minute ago we had a kasha on Rav. The fact that there's no knas by Golol indicates that knas is specific to a case where there is shvach, and Rav seemed to indicate otherwise. That was a kasha on Rav. Middekai read and Golol. The fact is we had a kasha from Golol on Rav. So evidently you don't have to wait for shvach to develop. Otherwise, what was the kasha? Golol has no shvach. But this, for 1 second, what do you mean to say? Ki arinan Golol. Look, sure, the kasha from Golol was mekamei the lishani of Nachman. Before Rav Nachman came up with the teretz that even Rav only applies a knas if it's something that it carries potential to make benefit. So before that teretz, we didn't know that yet. We figured, okay, the knas applies even to something which cannot create benefit and create shvach. So that brought us to the kasha. Well, what about Golol? What happened to the knas over there? What happened? Right? That was the kasha. But now, today, after the fact, after Rav Nachman's teretz, after Rav Nachman enlightened us to the fact that all agree the knas is only applicable in a situation where there is potential for gain, lebasar, after the shani of Nachman, after Rav Nachman gave his teretz, then of course the whole equation changed. Mi'ika lemirma Golol kla. How can we ask from Golol? Golol has no potential for shvach. Right? So that kasha sort of just fell by the wayside. All agree that knas is only applicable to something that has the potential for gain, for shvach. Material that can improve by lying in the street, right? So knowing that, now it's fair to ask the next question. Okay, according to Rav, that the shvach applies to... so according to Ziri, the knas only applies to the shvach element, the part that I gained off the street. Whereas according to Rav, it applies to everything, but maybe you have to wait until I have some sort of shvach that triggers the knas. But before this shvach, I didn't really cross that threshold, and I don't have a knas applied to me. So that's a good question, which you don't really have a resolution. Okay, so perhaps this machlekes between Rav, who says that the knas applies to the entire thing, and Ziri, who says it's only limited to the shvach aspect, perhaps it's a machlekes tanaim as well. The same concept is found in a Bryce, a Mishnah. Shtar shekasa by ribus. So this fellow wrote a shtar, loan document, look, I'm lending you $1 million, give me back $2 million. So there's ribis incorporated into the actual arrangement, it's in the document. Listen to this. He loses everything. He loses the entire loan. He can't collect the actual principal or the ribis. There's a knas applied to the whole. We don't differentiate. That's Rabbi Shita. The knas applies to the keren and the ribis. No. True, I can't collect the ribis, but I can collect the actual principal. So it's a limited, limitation. Says the Gemara, Leima Rav Damakar Rav Meir. So perhaps Rav, who says that knas is all-encompassing, goes like Rav Meir. Uziri Damakar Rabban. Uziri says it's limited, like the Rabban. Amalach Rav. Rav said no. Ano Damri Fil Rabbanon. My opinion, over here in the sugya with the waste in the street, follows even the Rabbanon by the ribis. You know why? Perhaps it's only over there the Rabbanon say, but I still get back my actual loan. Ella keren de bet teira, because the actual loan is mutter. I did nothing wrong, right? It's my money. Avalacha keren guvaga mazik. But over here by the material put in the street, the actual material is triggering the hazard, the obstacle. So it makes perfect sense that the knas applies to the entire thing. Go take it away, clear it out. Uziri on the other hand will say just the opposite. My opinion that the knas is limited follows even Rav Meir. Perhaps it's only by the ribis. The Rav Meir maintains that the knas covers everything. I lose the entire loan. Elo de mishas ksiva. You know why? Because at the moment when I drafted that document, the avadai summa. Summa means placement. I made this arrangement. I established that this is a ribis transaction. So that ribis sort of taints the entire loan. So I lose everything. But over here by the material in the street, who says it's going to cause damage? So until that happens, you can't just go and penalize me. Oh, so perhaps this discussion will match up with a different machlekes tanai. Person puts his material out in the street. A person slips on it. You have to pay for damages. Anybody can come take it. It's free. But you may not take it. There's an issue of gezel, which is going to be something we're going to try to clarify in a minute. In any case, that's a Tanna Kamma. Take it. Enjoy it. Rabbi Shimon Leimer, all people who create havoc in the street, who put hazards down, and they cause damage, they have to pay. Anybody has a right to take it. No problem stealing. Take it. Let's go back to the Tanna Kamma. The wording is inherently difficult to understand. First you say, Amrus kol hakoyd memzacha. Anybody can take it. Bava Kamma, then you say, well, no, keep away. Asur mishum gezel. You're not allowed to steal. What does this mean? El lavachi kama. Oh, the only way we can understand the brayso would be like this. The question is, how far does the knas apply? Does it apply just to the shavach, to the extra, or even to the actual material? El lavachi kama. Kol hakoyd memzacha. Anybody can come take b'shvach on the extra that I made in the street. So again, the material initially was worth 100, it went up to 200 because of the fact that it was lying in the street. Somebody can take $100 worth now. Basur b'shum gezel means that there's an issue of stealing agufan. You can't take the actual principal, the original amount. That's the Tanna Kamma. So it's a limited knas, like Zeiri. Also, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no. Afilu gufan nami kol hakoyd ben zacha. You should know anybody's free to take anything. So perhaps this discussion is really machlekes tanoim. How far does the knas go? Says the Gemara, not so fast. L'zeiri vaday tanoim. Zeiri, who maintains that the knas is limited to the shvach aspect, certainly it's going to be machlekes tanoim because clearly Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that the knas applies to everything. Anybody can take anything. But according to Rav, who says that the knas is all encompassing, do we really have to say that he's only siding with one Tana, with the second Tana as opposed to the first Tana? No, Amalach Rav can say like this: the kuli alma konsu gufan mishum shvacha. We can very well learn that all Tanoim whether it's Bava Kamma, or Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel will hold that the knas spreads into the guf as well. Sometimes we have this idea that we make a halacha, but we don't want to publicize it. For whatever reason, we don't want it to become, free for all. So it's a halacha ve'ein moirin ken. We don't actually paskin like that. We don't publicize it. So if one comes to ask, we say, don't take it. And that's the shita of Tanna Kamma. Technically, if a person takes it, he can walk away with it. But Asur Mishum Gezel means he comes to ask, we tell him keep away. The Diatma, as we learned, Ravuna Mar Rav, halacha ve'ein moirin ken. True, you can take it, but we sort of discourage it. Rav Ada bar Rava Amar halacha moirin ken. No, we encourage it. Eini, is that so? The Rafuna Marab says we don't discourage it, we don't encourage. Rafuna afke chushli. Rafuna himself noticed a pile of peeled barley in the street for to dry, and he announced that it's hefker, free for all. Rav Ada bar Rava afker slikust. Another story. Rav Ada bar Rava, he noticed some skins of dates, which were used for beer making, sitting in the street, and he made it hefker. So Bishlam Rav Ada bar Rava Geshmate. So it makes sense, because Rav Ada bar Rava, he held a minute ago that we do publicize it, we do encourage it. But Ravuna Marav, that's the problem. Ravuna Lema Hadar Bey. Ravuna said we don't publicize. So why did he change his mind? Hanu Musar and Havu is a different story. Musar and Havu, these people were warned. They were warned against doing what they were doing. That's a different story. It's not a first-time offender. This fellow was a warned habitual offender. So therefore, in this case, we sort of loosen the regulations and we allow people to take it and clean out the street. Okay, so we had one Mishnah and another Mishnah. In the first Mishnah we spoke about a person spilling his stuff into the street. He's chayev. We spoke about caring for thorns and glass and being a chassid and milid avos, milid zikin, milid brachis. When a person's even allowed to put his stuff in the street, you have to be careful not to cause damage. But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He holds if you have reshus your potter, except if it's out of season, or something which is extra hazardous, like teven mekash. So the halach is anybody can come take the stuff, but the question is to what extent. Riziri says only as much as you gain from putting it in the street. The knas is a limited knas, whereas Rav says it spreads onto the whole thing. We figured maybe it's totally in machlekes tanaim regarding ribbis. We differentiated. We found another machlekes tanaim which actually discussed this very case. At the end of the day, we said it's machlekes whether halacha of a moirin kain, we tell you to actually grab it, or halacha of ein moirin kain, although technically it's mutter to grab the stuff in the street, but we don't encourage it, and that's Rav Huna Rav's shita, except where this fellow was forewarned. Ignore our warnings, in which case we give you a green light. All the best to you and Hatzlacha Rabbah.